Everything is relative to perception, and as we allow ours to expand, then we will begin to see and live more. This is Skull Babylon, and you're about to listen to episode 31 of Paradigm Shift Radio, in which we welcome scientist and author David Yurth onto the show to talk about science, consciousness, and our future. Avoiding the use of scientific jargon, we discuss what consciousness is versus current models of science and how alternative models may help open us up to greater perceptions of nature and our own potential within this reality. Through the harmonization of science and spirituality, we will tread a new path towards a brighter and more vibrant future. Join us on Facebook at facebook.com/paradigmshiftradio, share PSR with some friends, join us for future episodes, continue the conversation, and enjoy the show.
Once upon a thing called time, there were moments when science, art, and philosophy were not divided, but rather unified under a single journey of exploration, expression, and a greater search for truth. Now believe me, we are returning to this place from which we came. As we continue to wake up, as we continue to remember and see the unity, the oneness, the interconnectedness of all things, the awareness, the consciousness that we all are, always have been, and always will be. So now, we are at a time when each and every one of us must make the choice to rise up to our responsibilities. For if we have the ability to do something for the betterment of others, are we not obligated to do it? We must ask ourselves this, because in helping others, we are helping ourselves. Yet in order to help others even more, it is essential that first we must efficiently help ourselves and to refine ourselves and to evolve on a personal level. There is a future I can see, and there is a journey that we all must take. The task I have in mind is a very tangible one that we can all be a part of. It is one that requires love, gratitude, valor, and a desire to learn. Many of you stand with me, and so as we venture further on this quest, let my strength be your strength, loyalty, honor, a willing heart. I can ask no more than that, because I would take each and every one of you over the mightiest sheeple army. We all have a great deal more to offer than we may even know. And so together, we will challenge ourselves, sharpen our perception. We will seize this opportunity with the incarnation and take back Ereborn, reclaim our minds, reclaim our divine right as humans on earth, and change the world in doing so for the greater good. For the greater good. Namaste to you, my friends. This is Skull Babylon, aka Brendon Wolfshield Culton, your comrade in light and psychic ninja artist of the future, and you are tuned in for another exciting consciousness-expanding episode of Paradigm Shift Radio. Bonus points to anyone who caught the Hobbit reference in the intro there, but needless to say, I meant every word I said. So before we even get started, if you're listening to this show live or if you're listening to it in the future, either on Blog Talk, YouTube, or iTunes, please share it forward, tell your friends, and invite them to check it out. So share it on Facebook, Twitter, or Google Plus if you're really weird. Tonight on the show, we will be welcoming scientist, author, and inventor David Yurth onto the show to talk about science, consciousness, our future, repressed technologies that can change the world, and beyond. Among other things, we'll be talking about the experiences we as humans have that cannot be measured to a ruler and thus lie beyond the current paradigm of mainstream scientific models. Things such as out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, dream exploration, remote viewing, life between life, so forth and so on. And at that point, at some point, we will also be getting into the topic of repressed technologies that could potentially change the world, as I mentioned. We will bring David onto the show in the not-too-distant future, at which point he will further introduce himself. But before we do that, I would just like to personally welcome all of our new listeners out there who may be tuning into the show for the first time, and a shout-out to everyone who is joining us in the live chat. If you'd like to be a part of the live chat for this episode and future ones, simply log into Blog Talk Radio link using your Facebook or create an account, refresh the page, scroll down, say hello, and you're good to go. Of course, I encourage you to connect with each and every other person in the live chat, so feel free to post your own personal Facebook pages and invite other people to connect with you, because after all, this show is about community and about strengthening the grid. So for those who may not be too familiar, Paradigm Shift Radio is on Facebook at facebook.com/Paradigm Shift Radio, and it's a show we do every Saturday live at 11 p.m. EST, and it's a chance for us as a community to practice talking about the things commonly less talked about in normal public spheres. The purpose of Paradigm Shift Radio is to entertain, educate, and inspire. Of course, there's more to it than that, because Paradigm Shift Radio is a media branch of Paradigm Shift Central. So visit www.paradigmshiftcentral.com. Paradigm Shift Central is a global collective. It's a hub for a global collective of youth-initiated communities that encourage open-mindedness, healthy living, and the evolution of consciousness. There's over 60 of them across the world, and that number is continuing to rise throughout the weeks. Similar to what we do here on the radio show, these communities have physical meetings where people get to talk in person and share their knowledge, their experiences, and practice with each other as a means to support one another as we continue to grow. Anyone is welcome to start up a Paradigm Shift community. The only prerequisite is a personal permission that you give yourself. So for tips on starting up a Paradigm Shift community and to check out the other Paradigm Shift communities, visit facebook.com/Paradigm Shift Central and click the link posted at the top of the page. So in terms of community news, there are no new Paradigm Shift communities to announce this week, but needless to say, the ones that are up and running are continuing to evolve day by day. Now, as for myself, my name is Skull Babylon, aka Brendon, as I said, and I am a neo-gonzo journalist of the future, and also an international award-winning filmmaker with a desire to help change the world, and a big part, and also a proud member of Paradigm Shift London, Ontario. So just to give you a bit of a backstory, Paradigm Shift was something that my friends and I started about 4 years ago as a single club in our college, which has since evolved into a global network. And we launched it evolved into a global network when we launched the radio show back in June. It's always been my intention to make Paradigm Shift a global community, but first I had to successfully demonstrate that it could be successful in my immediate community, proving that what can happen here can happen anywhere. So while in the college and university, I studied media theory and production, and I've been continuously making videos related to Paradigm Shift and the evolution of consciousness as a means to document the process and help share the story as a means to, previously said, entertain, educate, and inspire. 1 second. So you can check out a lot of my personal work up on my YouTube at youtube.com/SkullBabylon. Add me on Facebook at facebook.com/SkullBabylon, and go to ParadigmShiftCentral.com to see a large majority of the content that is posted up there as well. Notably, on December 21st, 2012, we released the Journey to Rockmont full-length film online, which you can view, which is up there for free for your viewing pleasure, so please feel free to check that out when you get the chance. All this Paradigm Shifty business is something I have been doing voluntarily, and it's both a passion and a hobby of mine, and one that I am most definitely committed to, which I think is evident to the fact that I've stayed in for the past 31 Saturday nights in a row to do this radio show with you guys. So thanks for tagging along for the ride. Now, the reason that I'm reiterating all of this is because I just recently put up the Skull Babylon Future Projects Fund at GoFundMe.com/SkullBabylon. So GoFundMe.com/SkullBabylon. The purpose of this, as the title states, is to help raise funds for future projects. So to clarify, I'm not asking you to send me money to help pay my bills, but rather I'm asking you to collaborate alongside with me and assist with the production of future projects and help expand consciousness and shift paradigms across the globe. I have a lot of ideas in my brain, and I'm looking forward to manifesting them into this reality, and with your help, we can manifest them even quicker. So just to give you a bit of an idea on the potential behind the fundraising project like this, because I would love to see it succeed beyond my expectations, as of right now, Paradigm Shift Radio is reaching out to more and more people each week, and on average for the last few shows, we have been floating around 350 to 400 live listeners with an additional 1,000 plus listeners afterwards. Now, in theory, if each of you who are listening to this, each of you who appreciate the hard work it takes to bring it all together and would love to see more of this magic, if each of you were to donate $1, well, I think you can do the math in your head, so you get the idea. And even if you're not able to donate, thank you anyways, simply by listening, following your heart, and sharing these kinds of ideas and vibes with other people, you're contributing to the overall mission. So again, even if you're listening to the show and you've had a good time in the process, check out the gofundme.com/skullbabylon. And do not feel obligated. You do not owe me anything. Said and done, it's my dharma to serve you. Of course, this fund campaign is going to be an ongoing thing, so expect to hear me mention it again in the future with updates about projects being manifested as a result of your contributions. And of course, speaking of donations, you're also welcome to donate to Paradigm Shift community at large. So go to paradigmshiftcentral.com/donate. Along with other things, the funds from this go towards covering the monthly website and blog talk radio costs, which equal out to about $70 a month. Excuse me. Plus, the money goes towards promotion of online content through Facebook, so we can reach out to more people and continue to change the world in very real ways. So for those of you who listen to Paradigm Shift Radio on the go, good news, Paradigm Shift Radio is now available on iTunes. I've gone back and updated all of the show MP3s to include the proper introduction at the beginning of each one. So if you are on iTunes, if you use iTunes, feel free to go back and listen to the past episodes of the show and use the iTunes link in the episode info of this Blog Talk episode. It's also on the paradigmshiftcentral.com/PSR information. But make sure that, well, if you're listening to this episode live, don't click that link. Make sure you right-click and open it up in a new tab, or you'll accidentally leave this page and miss some of the content. So you can also, like as I said, find the iTunes information at paradigmshiftcentral.com/PSR. And whether you even use iTunes or not, please feel free to leave us a review on iTunes, because your reviews help boost the show up so that we can reach out to more people. And also, you will notice that the iTunes episodes only go back to episode 11, and that's because the previous episodes prior to that were ones where we were doing it through Michael Brazel's Blog Talk Radio account, and he was on episode 29 just recently. But you can find the original MP3 links through the paradigmshiftcentral.com/PSR links, and also on the YouTube videos as well. Now, last couple things. Relative to the previous episode we did about dream exploration, just to let you guys know, I've started putting up my own video dream logs again, so you can go to YouTube and check those out there. I'll post a link into the live chat. In these videos, I give you I share some trippy experiences that I've been having in my dreams, plus some practical tips to help encourage you to continue and start and continue your own dream exploration practices. So just a little mention there. And some more exciting news, and to give you a preview of what's on the horizon in terms of Paradigm Shift Radio, this is going to be pretty exciting. Next week on January 26th, so episode 32, presuming all goes to plan, we're going to be having the director of the movie Be Brave on the show, as well as Erin, the sister of Daniel Northcott, who the film is about. So Be Brave, just to give you a little bit of a synopsis, Be Brave is a story that is unfolding as we speak. It's about a brilliant young man who saw and lived the oneness within everything. Daniel traveled around the world documenting his experience with the intention of creating a film to share, to unite, and help awaken people with this awareness. Tragically, Daniel's life ended sooner than he had planned when he was diagnosed with leukemia, coincidentally after removing a spherical bone from a Mayan burial site, an act which was said to be cursed. Circles within circles within circles. This was Daniel's message. The story continues as Daniel's sister Erin left her with thousands of hours of his footage. And the story picks up as she continues to move forward with her brother's dream to finish the film and to share his story. The film is being brought together with the help of the people at Elevate Studios, and the film is currently running their own Indiegogo campaign, which ends around February 1st. So please check out the trailer and contribute if you can to this amazing project. And I'll post a link for the Indiegogo in the live chat. But the Indiegogo is indiegogo.com/be-brave, and the Facebook page is facebook.com/be-brave-movie. So like I said, that'll be a very, very special show once that all falls into place. And following that, on February 2nd, episode 33, we'll be joined by Kelly Mays, one of the most recognized female rap artists out there, who sings and promotes messages of unity and consciousness. And you can check out more of her information on her website at kellymaze.com, and that's spelled KELLEEMAIZE.com. So both of those are going to be good ones, so get stoked. It's onwards and upwards from here, needless to say. So with all this information under our belt, let's get ready to get into the topic of tonight's episode. Now, since tonight's topic is related to science, I thought it would be a good idea to bring on another person into this conversation who has a good scientific background and a good scientific perspective on things. Now, that person is Colby from Paradigm Shift Tallahassee, who has been with us on the show in the past. So before we bring him on, just a reminder that later in the show we will be doing a regular synchronized group meditation. Then after the show we will be doing our regular Paradigm Shift Radio after party through Google Hangouts. So the links will be posted on the Facebook page as well as through the live chat. So if you have something to say and you didn't make it onto the show or just wanted to chat casually and hang out, the Paradigm Shift Radio After Party is the place to do it. And those parties are recorded and shared to YouTube as well for the documentation purpose. And of course, anyone who is interested is welcome to call into the show tonight if you have a question for David or perhaps something relevant that you would like to bring into the conversation. I'll use my judgment in terms of when we bring people onto the show, but feel free to call in a little bit later once we get going. And last reminder, remember, this is a family show, family-friendly show. Now, that means, because I know there are people out there who listen to the show with their younger siblings and even, their children as well. So shout out to anybody who's listening to the show who happens to be like under 15 years old, because that's pretty awesome and that's what we need more of. So with that said, let's keep it PG, let's keep it educational, and let's keep it fun for everyone. All right, so Colby, if you're ready, we're going to bring you onto the show, and then we will bring David on shortly afterwards. So Colby, if you're all good to go, I'm just going to bring you on now. Hey Colby, you can hear me?
Hey, what's up everybody?
Hey man, all right, welcome back to the show. So, welcome and thank you for being here once again. I do appreciate your insight. Now, just give me a quick background.
Thanks.
You're studying some sort of science and stuff right now, aren't you?
Yeah, I just got my minor in physics this last semester, and I'm actually in industrial engineering right now with a focus in material science at Florida State. So.
Sweet.
And
and you've been really interested in the whole like consciousness stuff. So it'll be good to have some, it'll be good to have that extra person to bounce off ideas, because I'm not totally versed in the scientific jargon, so to speak. I mean, I didn't take a lot of science classes throughout school, but definitely like it's good to have like that additional perspective in this. So thanks for being here, man. And
thank you for having me.
Absolutely, and post a link for Paradigm Shift Tallahassee in the live chat if you don't mind while we're doing that. And, with that said, so we're going to bring on David now. So David, if you're ready, which I believe you are, I see one number that's in the live chat, and it's not showing up as his name, but I'm pretty sure it's him anyway. So I'm going to bring this number on, and we're going to presume that it's David. So David, if you're ready, we're going to bring you onto the air now. So let's try this out. Hello, is this David?
Hi, it is. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. We can hear you. Now it's a little. There seems to be like some static or a little bit of extra noise coming through on your end.
Yeah, we've got a noisy system here. That's just part of our challenge.
Okay. Is there anything that you can do to deal with that, so to speak?
Well, I have a noisy.
That's like the actual computer that you're working with, eh?
Got a fan that makes a lot of noise.
Okay. Actually, David, since we did talk briefly over the phone, but we didn't talk over Skype. Would you mind calling back in on your phone just so we can work with better clarity? Are you okay with doing that?
Sure.
All right. Okay. So literally, like, you don't have to hang up on Skype right now, but dial in with your phone, and then we'll just switch over as we do that. So.
Okay. Let's see.
So bear with us, folks. We're just trying to bring you the most audibly tolerable content that we can. So just hang out for a second. And so right now, just for everybody who's listening, I'm just gonna gently mute David just for a second there, just as I wait for his number to show up so he can still hear us. So just while we're waiting here, just shout out to everybody who's in the live chat. Right now in the live chat, we have about 43 people, and let me just make sure. I just want to make sure that David does have the number properly to dial into the host. So I'm just gonna do a couple technical things there. And okay, I think okay. So we're gonna bring David on through his phone now. So 1 second. Okay, there we go. All right, David, you can hear us now?
I can.
Okay, that is a lot better. So we'll work with this. All right, cool. And Colby, you're still with us?
I think I am.
You think you are?
All
right. Perfect. All right, so let me just give a little bit of an introduction in terms of a bio as to who David Yurth is, because a lot of people, like in terms of, there's a lot of people out there on the internet, and I think a lot of people who are listening to this probably haven't heard of you, so to speak. So David Yurth, as I'm reading his bio, is a scientist, writer, and technology innovator. He has received numerous patents, written and published several books, and currently serves as the Director of Science and Technology for the Nova Institute of Technology in Salt Lake City. So thank you, David, for being on the show with us here today. And just give us a little bit more of an introduction as to, well, first of all, where are you calling from right now? Are you in Utah?
I am. I'm in Salt Lake City. We've got 15 inches of snow on the ground, and it's 11 degrees Fahrenheit here.
Cool. All right, so is there any more of like a bit of an introduction that you would like to just tell the audience about yourself and before we get into the meat of the conversation here?
Well, I can say that, I'm an old guy. I've been in the technology development business for about 40 years. I've been into school. I've got some paper, and I've done some inventions and done some technologies and written some books, and deeply invested in this conversation. So, really looking forward to seeing where we go this evening.
Absolutely, because, it was interesting because I didn't find you. Your assistant actually reached out to me and said, look, like, David is this brilliant man who has a lot of valuable perceptions on today's current scientific model as well as, like, other scientific models that aren't in the mainstream. And your assistant was really explaining to me just, like, passionately, she's like, we want to be able to share this with more people. And that's why you're here today, is because, like, you're passionate about getting this information out there. So, like, what is it, what is so valuable that you feel about being able to share the conversation that we're going to have with tonight, about consciousness, about science, and about, like, alternative ways of sort of, like, seeing how the world works around us?
Well, it's really fundamental as far as I'm concerned. See, the way we think about physics really defines how we think about the universe and our place in it. What that means to me is that if the science we practice is based on models that are fundamentally flawed, then our notion about how the universe works and what our role in the cosmos is must also be flawed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a fundamental issue for me. I mean, we all ask the same really basic question: where did I come from? What am I doing here? And where do I go when this is all over?
Right.
What is the purpose of being here? Well, what models do we have to rely on to inform our judgment about this? And as our notions about the physical world change, our notions about who we are also change.
That's right.
Right? So
yeah.
In the days of the Roman Empire, when science said that thunder was simply a manifestation of an argument between the gods, the idea that the physical world is driven by unseen forces that we know about by experience, that we believe in but do not understand and can have no influence over, changed the way people thought about themselves. It affects how we treat each other. It affects how we relate to each other. It affects how we focus our time on the planet and our energies. It has a profound effect on the way we live.
Mm-hmm.
So if our model is wrong, then our notions must also be not properly informed. And for the last 40 years, along with a lot of other people, I've been researching and building and doing what I think is very good science, trying to find out whether or not the model of the universe that we're being taught is correct or not. And I'm firmly convinced that the standard physical model, as it's taught in colleges and universities, is so fundamentally, severely crippled that it cannot possibly explain what really goes on in nature.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you make that discovery, then you'd have to say to yourself, well, if that's not right, then what is right? If that isn't true, what is true?
Mm-hmm.
So it does no good to simply throw daggers at ideas. If we're going to actualize, if we're going to do what we came to do and be who we came to be, then we've got to figure out what is correct, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I think one thing that's sort of come up time and time again, and it was even sort of mentioned, in past episodes, and even this idea of like oneness and unity is this whole idea, and it's trying to keep this very simplistic. I want to be able to have a conversation here with the idea that there are young people listening. So
sure.
every lesson that we give should be relative to the student. So regardless of the fact that we're talking about science, there should really be nothing here that's going to be like over and above anyone's head, so to speak. So I think one thing that we can all understand is the fact that our perception of the world around us is not the be-all, end-all. Like, that is just how we perceive the world. So, I mean, we have our common five senses, and we understand that there's, like, matter and stuff, but then even still, there's, like, the space between space. There's no such thing as empty space. It's something that has come up time and time again. And I just think it's really interesting when we have to take into consideration the idea that there are so many experiences that we have that extend beyond what science recognizes as like this physical dimension. And, I'm talking about things such as like the dreaming experiences, such as like the out of body, and such as like, the life beyond life. And if those experiences exist, surely there must be a way to investigate them, but not under today's scientific model, so to speak. So let's sort of just back up a couple steps. Now, I think the term consciousness gets thrown around a fair amount these days. David, in your words, how would you explain consciousness? I mean, my simple way is I almost think consciousness is like synonymous to awareness. How would you describe it?
Well, you have a basic issue here that we need to grapple with, it seems to me, in order to get to the heart of this question, and that is that we've got to make sure that the language we use really communicates, right? Because when you talk about consciousness, you're talking in terms that convey meaning that is loaded. And what I mean by that is that the fundamental argument, the basic premise of the standard physical model that we inherited from a turf deal between René Descartes and the Catholic Church 250 years ago is that consciousness is nothing more than the manifestation of increasing complexity in the physical organization of matter. What that means in simple terms is that you ask a scientist, the party line is that consciousness just happens because things get sufficiently complex in their organization. So a simple life form cannot be intelligent because it's not complex enough. But at some point there is enough complexity, so then there is consciousness and awareness. Well, that's all well and good, but the evidence doesn't satisfy that assertion. What we know about consciousness, based on all kinds of scientific research that's been conducted by some really, really smart people, impeccably documented, repeatedly verified and validated in the very best scientific terms, is that the universe itself is conscious, that it is self-referential, that it is not only intelligent, but that from the very finest scales of organization, consciousness operates contemporaneously with physical matter. That means that consciousness and physical stuff cannot in any meaningful way be separated. They can't be detached.
Right.
And that's the reason science gets in trouble with this issue of consciousness, because the whole notion of science is that a scientist is going to be a passive investigator who stands back and with detachment, without exerting any influence at all, going to cast things in motion and observe and measure and record them. And what we know about that now, that science has never come to grips with, is that there is no meaningful distinction between the observer and the means of observation and that which is being observed. Things just by watching them.
Yeah.
Just by seeing things happen.
Yeah, the act of observation changes the outcome. Yeah.
It does.
Now, David, have you seen the movie What the Bleep Do We Know?
Sure.
Yeah, because I mean that's a common film that came out a few years ago that a lot of people are familiar with, and I think that film in itself was a good introduction to the idea of there being aspects that today's scientific model are just it sort of brings up this big question where they don't really have a direct answer to it, but every time they try to pursue a solidified answer, like it changes, so to speak, once you really start looking at it at that sort of quantum level. So now, I mean, just like continuing along this, like what new models are there that you're aware of that sort of expand to incorporate greater understandings of like consciousness and the scientific field? Like I know you've mentioned the why bias model. Is that something that you can explain for people listening?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Let's make a clear distinction here. And Colby, if you want to jump in here anytime.
Yeah, by means, Colby.
Okay. So look, the prevalent cosmological model that is used by science to describe, what the universe is and what it does and how it works and how it came to be the way it is this notion called the Big Bang model of the universe.
Right.
Right? Well, the Big Bang model says that sometime 15, 20 odd billion years ago, this whacked out singularity event occurred in which out of nothing, everything was instantly created. At some finite point in time, out of nothingness came everythingness, and in a matter of a few seconds, everything that makes up the universe was instantaneously created. And that in the ensuing eons, the billions of years thereafter, that everything from that infinitely hot point in space now cooling down so that eventually it'll all get cold again and it'll come back together and it won't exist anymore. That entropy will set in. Well, people operate in science as if the Big Bang is a fact. And it's not a fact. It's just an idea.
Right.
And it's not even a very good idea. Because in order to promote the very notion of it, you have to violate every single principle of the standard physical model that's being taught in the colleges and universities now. It's an indefensible idea. There's no such thing as dark matter. There's no such thing as dark energy. There's lots of things that are propounded by the Big Bang model of the universe that are absolutely categorically unsupportable. But that model, the outside-in model that has a beginning and a trajectory and an end, is a product of the Western mind that cannot deal with the notion of infinity. Now, what we know for sure, based on all of the evidence that's available to us, is that the cosmos, nature, operates from the inside out It is constantly creating and uncreating, organizing and disorganizing, engineering and re-engineering, and modifying itself at every scale, everywhere, all the time. It always has, and it always will. And we know what the steps in that process are. We know what they are. We've defined them. We've identified them. We've validated them with experimental evidence. Well, this is a profound distinction that says, look, if you buy the notion, the scientific notion of the Big Bang, what does that say about the nature of soul? Does that leave any room for the eternal nature of soul? Does it leave any room for the irreducible nature of consciousness? You know, if the Big Bang model of the universe really is an accurate description of how things work, how is it that children, properly coached, can sit together in a room and melt steel spoons in their hands?
Spoon bending.
How does that work? How does remote viewing work? That it works is not arguable. It does work.
Right.
So, you know, there isn't any room in the Big Bang model for the other half of the equation that represents what happens with consciousness and its operating dynamics in the cosmos. If we know, on the other hand, that the universe operates at its core in a way that is clearly definable with simple, elegant, absolutely consistent rules for which there are no exceptions and which accommodate all the stuff that science can't deal with. If we know that consciousness arises from the same set of dynamic organizational factors as all the physical stuff, and if we know what those rules are, then we have a way to understand what consciousness is. Not only can we understand what it is, but we can figure out what it does and how it works and how to use it to satisfy the rest of the question. What are we doing here?
Yeah. Now,
the Big Bang model doesn't allow that to happen.
Yeah, I actually have, it's funny because, you know, when you're talking about the Big Bang model and just the fact that you're right, the Western mind, the Western world thinks it's this absolute thing, that when in fact it's just a belief, so to speak. And when I was like coming into a lot of my own learning, there was a lot that sort of came to me just like intuitively, I guess you could say, and a lot of this like came through sacred geometry. And it was interesting because at one point I was just like, without even reading any books, I was just like, wait a second, like this Big Bang idea, like this doesn't make sense. Like I don't think this is how it worked. And then my alternative idea within my head, the best way I can describe it, because, you know, the way the Big Bang model is sort of presented, it's sort of as if there was like this big black empty space and then out of nothingness there was everythingness. Whereas like what my alternative perception of it is that working with the idea of like higher dimensions, you know, again, kind of we've talked about this in the past, but like this physical density is just the density of this vibration. As you change the vibration, things become more nebulous, more cloud-like. So the origins of ourselves as consciousness, and this is just my guess, so to speak, opposed to there being a Big Bang, what there was and always has been was almost like an infinite whiteness. There was an infinite like cloudiness, and then over time that cloudiness like began to slowly crystallize into a density that is this reality. There never was like a single moment where things just suddenly came into being. Like there always was a moment of everythingness, which is like, you know, the higher dimensional realms. And then what I kind of used to comprehend this was the simple understanding of sacred geometry. Because, you know, again, you know, today's scientists have trouble working with the concept of infinity, when in fact, I think infinity can be understood quite simply through understanding sacred geometry. It's this idea, like, out of simplicity comes complexity. And sacred geometry, like, a simple way to understand infinity is like, and I've sort of mentioned this before, but even just visually in your head right now, like picture what is commonly recognized as the Star of David, the, you know, two-dimensional star tetrahedron. And then you take one of those and you place it inside of it and it fits perfectly. And then you take another one and you fit inside of that and it fits perfectly. And then inside of that, inside of that, inside of that. And again, like this goes back to this idea of like the micro and the macrocosm, which is why we have all these fundamental patterns that occur like on the most minute scale as well as the most like absolute grand scale. That's why your fingerprint looks like the spiral of a galaxy, so to speak. So now I just want to give Colby a chance to jump in here. Colby, what are your thoughts just sort of on what you've been hearing from here so far?
Well, I definitely like, you know, trying to talk about consciousness in scientific terms is something that I do a lot with some of my colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to give a shout out to this movie that I saw that really kind of blew my lid on the whole thing. It's called The Quantum Activist, and that is a movie that follows this guy named Amit Goswami. He's a PhD. He got it from the University of Oregon. He was actually in What the Bleep Do We Know as well, one of the guys that was interviewed for that movie. But this basically just follows his more mystical interpretations of the quantum mechanical field, and it describes consciousness, or he describes consciousness in this movie as something that we receive, you know, like our brains are a receptor of it, and in a way it condenses all of the possible happenings from the quantum field into our physical reality. So I think that's a really good video for you guys to check out. It's probably about 90 minutes if you guys haven't seen it. It's called The Quantum Activist. But
let me give you just a concept to spin around here.
Alrighty.
The very notion that there is, I mean, if you go to a scientific textbook and you ask the question, what is mass?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The definition of mass is always given in terms of its attributes. So mass is described as an intrinsic property of matter.
Mm-hmm.
But it's never described in terms of what it actually is.
Right.
And the same circuitous sort of thing happens in physics when you talk about things like magnetism. What is magnetism? Magnetism is a property exhibited by certain categories of elements in the periodic table.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you talk in terms of Einsteinian magnetic potential, the notion that magnetism can be defined in terms of what it is, rather than in how it manifests itself, is absent in the language. So what we've done in our model, if you go on the internet and you Google the term Y-bias and angularity, just Google that term, you'll get about 7 million hits. And you'll see that model, which we published open source on the internet in 2005, provides a basis for discussing mass in terms of what it is, rather than what it does and how it behaves. That makes a whole bunch of very interesting things possible that weren't possible before. So what we assert is that everything, absolutely everything at its core, is simply information. And everything you see, everything that exists, everything that operates in the cosmos represents, actually is, a manifestation of information organized in a very specific way, according to very specific sets of rules. And if we know what those rules are, then we can begin to understand how things really work, how nature really works. Science doesn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't do that. Science is the 11 blind men trying to describe an elephant, right?
Right.
I mean, you know, you take your data and you throw it on the wall, and depending on your point of view and the language you use and the concepts and the constructs and the abstracts and all of the things that are revolving around in your view of the world, you throw it out there on the wall and see if it fits with anything else. But there isn't cogency in the model, and there are always exceptions.
I think that.
So
go ahead.
So what I'm suggesting to you here is that if consciousness, just like physical matter, just like light, just like energy in all of its forms, is nothing more than information in its primal condition, organized in very specific ways to behave in particular ways with respect to whatever form it is bounded to, then you can begin to understand it. For example, you know, Rupert Sheldrake wrote a really killer little book 20 years ago called 7 Experiments That Could Change the World.
Mm.
And Sheldrake is a world-class physicist. He asks this very interesting question. You've heard about the 100th monkey syndrome, right?
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah, the 100th monkey syndrome. Well, how does that work? I mean, 2 monkeys on an island are given a bag of sweet potatoes, and they begin to wash them. They've never seen sweet potatoes before, but monkeys on another island adjacent that have no way of communicating with the first group do exactly the same thing without ever having conversed with them. What makes that happen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's information floating around in the air, you know.
Exactly. There's a field. There actually is a series of dynamics that operate as field effects that are not recognized by science that make information available. And the way information is recognized is a function of the consciousness, of the wavelength, if you will, that consciousness operates on. Bird consciousness operates in a different way than monkey consciousness does. We have consciousness. We are aware that we're aware, but so are dolphins, and so are elephants, and so are other animals, but they're not tapped into the same wavelength as other species.
Right.
There's a whole set of rules that goes with what this is and what it does and how it works, and we know what those rules are. That's what the Y-bias model is all about, saying nature works by a set of very specific rules, and those rules are known. And the Fibonacci series of numbers, you know, the sacred geometries, are an intrinsic organizing general principle in all of nature everywhere.
Yeah, I think self-organizing is the term within the Y-bias model. That's pretty.
It is. It's called self-organizing criticality. Look, there was an experiment that was done in the early 90s by a guy named Per Bach. He wrote this wonderful little book called How Nature Works. And his investigative objective was to figure out how to examine natural phenomena in a way that would make it possible to predict things like earthquakes. So they reduced all of nature to the simplest of its manifestations. They made a pile of sand. Only they did it in a very particular way. They took an apparatus that allowed them to put one grain of sand on top of another at the same rate from the same distance, same size granules, so that they built up a pile of sand, built it up, and at a certain point, part of that sand pile would slough away. You know, you've played the game on the beach where you build a sand pile and you try to hack a piece of it off without making it fall down, right? Well, this is a really profound concept, because there comes a point in time at which that pile of individual granules of sand is no longer just individual granules. It becomes a system. And then it begins to exhibit system behaviors. And what they learned after 11 years of building and measuring sand piles was that because of the nature of open, complex, self-organizing systems, you cannot predict the time, the locale, the magnitude, or the frequency of the avalanches that occur in the sand pile. What that means is that all of these linear predictive models that have been used by science from the very beginning, that say we have a language called math, it has a one-to-one relationship in the symbols and the things that they're supposed to represent, and if something happened yesterday, it has a linear relationship with what's going to happen tomorrow. Mm-hmm. It's just not true. It just is not true. Mm. And what we do know now, after 20 more years, is that the rules that operate in that sand pile operate ubiquitously in nature everywhere at every scale. Yeah. Everywhere. And that changes the way we think about the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how, like, if you want to learn something about anything, like, you can study one thing just very, very discreetly and in depth, and it will, like, reveal,
it's really a brilliant experiment.
Yeah, that is very cool.
Thousands of people have been trying to extend those results by looking at other things. What we now know is that earthquakes and the weather and the stock market and mass extinction and every other manifestation of open system behavior all behave according to the same set of rules. And that means you can't predict when an earthquake's going to occur, or where it's going to occur, or how big it's going to be, or how often it'll happen. You can't do it.
That's kind of like that symmetry and chaos is kind of a phrase that sort of comes to mind for me. Like, we sort of have these self-organizing patterns, but, like, within them, there's, like, this intrinsic chaos that sort of, like, creates a new direction for the pattern to sort of, like, expand into. But then in that new direction, it also creates, like, new creation and new birth. And
called, like, fractal geometry, Bud.
Yes. Very much so. So fractal geometry would be the term to use. Now, I want to. There's a lot of stuff I would love to get into, and if we don't get into it all today, for anybody listening, I'm sure we'll probably bring it up in the Google Hangout after party as well. But when we talk about some of these scientific ideas that we're talking about here, what I want to turn this into, like, a practical thing, so to speak. So, what are some of, like, what is, as we change our model of understanding, it starts to reveal to us more of the potential that we have within this reality. And it's kind of what we were going back to earlier about, like, how the observer actually, like, influences the reality around them. And more people are beginning to understand this, even in the sense of, like, the emotions we put out are the emotions, the energy we put out is the energy we attract. And like, energy flows where your attention goes. So from your perspective, David, and just to mention, there's actually another person who I'd like to bring on the air to join us in the next, like, 10 minutes. But from your perspective, like, what are some of these models revealing to us about, like, the potential that we have within this reality, like, both as physical beings and both as, like, soul beings, so to speak?
Well, we can talk about it from a number of different perspectives.
I don't know if you're... a pretty interesting example if you want to...
Colby, if you got something to mention, go for it, yeah.
Sure. I've actually been doing this thing for a while. I've been calling it internal water displacement, and it's just kind of going with the idea that we're like 80% water, right?
More than that, probably.
Yeah, probably. And so basically, you just want to imagine pushing that water to certain places that maybe you're not so dense in a way, like maybe your spinal column is not straight, and so you want to, like, take the water away from that, so you give it more space to align itself properly, right? And I've had a lot of really excellent results with this. My friend actually, he's been doing it for about 4 months now. He just texted me the other day that said, "Oh, I've been having so many good results. You're the only person who's giving me hope for, like," he's got one of those, like, concave chests, you know, and so he's, like, doing a lot of work on that, and he's seeing a lot of results. He says that he's a lot of improvement in his posture, so that, and I just was talking to him about the idea that, you know, we are quantum beings, whether you like it or not. We're made of atoms and molecules, you know, that behave the same way. So we are quantum systems, and what you believe, what you project into reality will come to fruition in one way or the other, you know, and it's just based on how much you believe it and how much you intend for it to happen. So that's, I mean, we have a lot of power in this reality.
You're right on the money, Colby. You're right on the money. Let me give you an idea to kick around. I'll ask you a question. If you could eliminate viral disease from the human condition, would you?
Well, you can't eliminate viral disease. You know, it just has to. It is just based on the condition. You know, you can't do it on a global human scale. You have to do it at the individual scale. So, but I mean,
if you could do it on a global scale, would you?
Well, sure.
Of course you would. You'd eliminate all that suffering, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is a virus?
Something that's not communicating with the surroundings.
Well, in the context of the conventional scientific model, a virus is a disease-causing organism that parasitically attacks other biological systems. Right? It's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
In the context of the Y-bias model, a virus is an information error.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at your body, as you say, as an information system that operates according to fundamental quantum dynamics, if you understand how the virus is organized, and you understand how that organizational structure operates, all you have to do to get rid of the virus is unwind it.
Mm.
It's similar, conceptually similar to overwriting an error in a software program.
Mm-hmm. Right. Analysis. Right.
So here's a piece of science that's absolutely real. You don't see it in the world because it's not being permitted.
Mm-hmm.
But in the early 80s, I participated in a study with a bunch of Russian physicians who brought a magic black box to the Centers for Disease Control. They treated 14 people under controlled conditions who were chronic sufferers of hepatitis C. It's a virus.
Mm-hmm.
The way they treated the virus was that they identified the specific viruses and their genotypes in terms of their energy signature. They then...
Is that a frequency?
Yes. There's a whole set of dynamics that go with the energy signature of a virus, but each virus and its genotypes very, very specific attributes. So, just like you do noise cancellation on a conference call, they imposed information on water using a magnetic system that was exactly the opposite of the energy signature of the virus, and then they infused that water through an IV, and what happened was that the water went into every cell, and the only thing that it affected was the virus, because the information that was carried in the water simply erased it.
So the waves, because they are oscillating pie away from each other. I forget what the word for that is. They're canceling each other out. Is that?
Yep.
Is that the idea?
Exactly. It's a noise cancellation process.
Very interesting.
It's a brilliant solution. Worked like gangbusters. And we were prevented from conducting the double-blind studies because people from the FDA stepped in at the behest of their partners in the pharmaceutical industry and prohibited us from conducting those tests, even though they'd been already conducted in the first phase at CDC. So, can we get rid of virus? Yes, we can. Does this new model tell us how to do it? Yes, it does. Does it work? Absolutely. I wrote a book about it. And the book's been optioned for a movie, and we're going to make that movie.
It's really funny. I'm sure there's some people that are trying to suppress that information, because I actually Googled your name before the show, and I came up with, David Yurth, fraud, Russian experiment, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what is this?
Well, the Russians don't like it when you tread on their turf. There's a guy named Alexander Concretny that's been trying to give me a bad time for about 10 years. And, that kind of goes with the turf. But the fact of the matter is that now that we know how those rules work, we can do all kinds of very interesting things. Think about what happens with cancer. What is cancer?
That's what
uncontrolled growth of your cells.
That's the answer that I gave for virus was the answer that I should have given for cancer. It's a group of something that is not communicating with the somethings around it.
It's an information error.
Yeah.
Right.
The reason you have cancerous cells is because the replicating RNA function creates errors. And if you know what the master program software looks like that does not contain errors, using the same kind of technique or some other similar kind of technique, you ought to be able, cancer type specific, to overwrite the error. And that's called healing.
It's funny because I seem to recall something about cancer treating magnetic fields. That's a new treatment now, and it sounds pretty analogous to what you just said. The experiment you did, 30 years ago, I guess. So.
Yeah, the guy who did it was a Frenchman by the name of Antoine Prieuré. You can find all of his information at the website www.cheneire.com.
Cool.
The French government sponsored his research for a period of 7 years. He built and demonstrated an apparatus which categorically demonstrated that every known disease-causing agent can be essentially eliminated in a single pass if the field is treated properly.
Yeah, and again, going back to, that field, everything has its own field. There's the bigger field, and then there's fields within fields within fields, sort of rings with circles within circles within circles, kind of what we were talking about earlier in the show. Now,
do you know about Vladimir Poponin and the phantom DNA effect?
I actually did. Yeah, I did see that article that he was able to have DNA within a magnetic field, and it just came about in some water.
Yeah,
outside of the apparatus.
Yeah, you can program DNA too. That's
well, you can. The phantom DNA effect is a spectacular piece of information because it tells us something about this entire subject of consciousness and the way we're built. What Poponin and his guys at the Russian Academy of Sciences did was really, really spectacularly smart. They built a chamber, was 1 meter cubed, and they did everything that we know how to do to eliminate every kind of waveform, static electricity, radio waves, cosmic waves, any kind of waves. They shielded the building, they shielded the room, they shielded the apparatus so that the space inside the box was absolutely pristine from external influence, right? Then they figured out on one side, one whole side of the cube, they populated that with close-coupled chip devices, which are the things that make your video cameras work. So they detect light, and you can convert that information into pictures. They connected that then to a computer, and then across the other 90-degree side, they put a laser. And they ran the laser through a diffuser, and they used a very specific frequency, and then they dropped very finely particulated talcum powder, about 2,000 grit. If you take talcum powder at 2,000 grit, if there's any static electricity anywhere, it just follows that line right to the surface. So they were able to drop this talcum powder in measured amounts from the top of the box to the bottom of the box. The laser light then diffracted off the particles as they fell through the air, and the charge-coupled devices were able to pick that up like your camera would pick up light and run it through a computer. And what they were trying to find out was whether the particles were organized in any way while they fell through the air. Were they organized, or was there chaos there? And so they got it to the point, took 3 years, where they could drop the talcum powder, turn on the lights, and turn on the cameras, and demonstrate absolutely unorganized behavior in the talcum. Then they put a petri dish in the bottom of the box with sterile saline water and one cell from the inside one of the technician's mouths, an epithelial skin cell from inside the mouth, a live cell. And the instant they introduced that live cell into that field, the next time they dropped the talcum powder, it was absolutely organized.
Wow.
And if they turned the petri dish 90 degrees, the field of organization turned 90 degrees. They were able to couple the light with the field generated by that single cell, and they learned a whole bunch of very interesting things about what being alive means.
Cool.
That single cell produced a field that operated at a distance of at least 1 meter. And when they took the cell out, the effect of the cell persisted for 31 days.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Even though it wasn't there, the field remained.
Huh.
Now think about that in terms of the human body. Your body has nearly 100 trillion cells. And every one of them generates that field. So what does that field look like when it is viewed as an aggregate accumulation of all the field effects generated by all those cells at the same time? What is that? What is that? What does it do? How does it work? So now we end up seeing that they organize themselves, and they manifest attributes. The ancient Hindus called them chakras. And those energy fields are absolutely real. And the Russians developed a technique for not only identifying them, but for retrieving information from the field and putting information into the field. It's the very first and only time that modern science, using any of its techniques, has found a way to couple with consciousness.
Cool. Now, David, I just want to, I have that other person who I mentioned, who I'd like to bring onto the air, and I believe he's actually going to be able to sort of jump into this conversation nicely. So we'll continue with what we're talking about here. So just as a quick introduction as to who I'm bringing on to the air right now, this man actually, his name is Kurt Hardesty, and I actually just came across his YouTube channel today when a friend of mine posted one of his videos, but he himself, he considers himself a student of body, mind, life, and movement. So I'm just going to post some links to his websites for everyone in the live chat. And without further ado, I'm going to bring Kurt on, and then we'll go into the meditation maybe around 12:30. And then again, any other topics that we don't get into here now, we'll bring up in the live chat, such as things like I'm always interested in talking about things like remote viewing and esoteric sciences and so forth. So, but we'll get to that. We have plenty of time, if not this show another. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Kurt on. So Kurt, if you're ready, get ready to jump into the conversation here. So here we go. Hello, Kurt. Can you hear us?
Hello.
Hello. There we go. Okay, cool.
Is that working?
It's working good, man. Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear. So now you actually said, what was it specifically that was just said that you felt that you could jump in on nicely when we were talking about the phantom DNA there?
So I guess I can recapitulate really quick because I have to jump back to something that was said earlier, and it's basically about like what science and thinking and thought and concepts are. And on a very real level, they're just technologies that we can not just or whatever. I hate that word, but it's technologies that you can use to generate a certain feeling state. So what you believe about this place helps you to generate technology or thought forms or interpretations that allow you to like feel certain ways. So we're sitting here on an entire mountain of concepts that allows us to talk about single cells in a test tube, blocking frequencies and all this other stuff. And so sort of as we talk about this, I would just like to sort of put a disclaimer out and realize that each concept that I'm talking about as we get into sort of molecular biology, much less consciousness and mind, is sitting on an entire mountain of thought that we could dive into infinitely. But so when we sit here and we study, I like to think of experiments in science as things that help us generate awesome feeling states. So,
or at least they should be anyway.
Did that make sense at all, or did I?
Yeah, no, totally.
Okay, so like we come up with the technology of distance, and we've seen some not ancient, but isolated tribes don't have the same understanding of distance as we do. So they throw spears at airplanes. It's sort of a learned technology. And as a baby, we refine our technology of distance by reaching out to the, say, cat to have the feeling state of furry. And we notice that when we don't have our distance technology calibrated correctly, we reach out and often what we want to get is not there. So then we create the technology of body, the technology of all this other stuff. And then you get into the physical things like this cellular experiment. And I guess I find it interesting because, like, what does that experiment do for us at first, I suppose, is my first question.
What it fundamentally does for us is it demonstrates that physical matter is not isolated from holographic fields in anything like the scientific model describes. What it demonstrates, it validates, is the notion that the field that we propagate because we're alive operates with persistence. It operates in ways that are non-local, that it demonstrates that the phenomenon, things such as remote viewing, now have a thoroughly explorable basis, which make it possible for us to understand not only what it is and what it does and how it works, but how to use it to become more informed. It's not a mystery anymore.
I think it also, like, that experiment...
Go ahead, Colby. What were you going to say?
I think it also, like, that experiment, it also validates the idea that, we didn't come from here, like our essence, our soul, like who we really are, like this could be brought to this planet, hundreds of millions of years ago, whatever. This could have been brought to this planet 5 minutes ago. Like there could be information. Well, there is information streaming through the cosmos, at all times, and the whole idea of beam me up, Scotty, that is not so laughable, So I think it really challenges what we call science fiction, and
well, it's only fiction until you understand it.
Yeah, like I think. Sorry. Okay, Kurt. I'll let you talk. I was just going to mention, maybe just take just like a little bit back from the mic. I don't know if it's just me, but I think your audio level is just a little bit higher than ours. So, but
okay.
Go ahead.
How's that? This good?
I think that's fine for everyone.
Okay.
So.
I think we're doing a disservice to science. Like, a lot of my thing is to try and make spirituality sort of scientific, which is it's constructing, science it's about, I guess it's about learning, although it seems this place is infinite, so I don't really know how I can learn any more about it. So it seems crap, I totally lost my train of thought. This is we're getting so abstract.
Let me throw an idea at you here, Kurt.
Yeah.
Try this on for size. If we look at conflict, and take a typical example of what's going on in the Middle East right now, where you've got lots of conflict and lots of aggression and lots of killing and lots of really nasty, ugly human stuff, the stuff people do to each other.
Okay.
Is there a way that can be forestalled? Can you stop that? Can you slow it down? Can you have an effect on it? Well, you can, and the way you can, the way we know you can, is because these fields that operate in each human can be brought together in coherence in the same way that laser light can be focused on an object. Intention can be focused on a situation. There's a thing that's been clearly experimentally verified called the Maharishi effect. Guys from Fairfield, Iowa, take 1,000 people, they go to Jerusalem, they sit on the top of the hill, they get focused, they come together, they meditate, and they change the way people feel. They change the way they behave. It's not as effective as we'd like it to be, but the fact that it works isn't arguable. So,
this
can
is
we
totally,
do that better? Sure
we totally can, and this is actually what I was this is what I derailed from, so thank you. The effect to be sort of in coherence with something else, to be able to move it, means that what makes us most effective when we're moving reality is not when we're thinking about it, but when we have a felt state of experiencing it. And so I noticed a lot of the times when people are exploring these phenomena conceptually, designing these experiments, creating these things, they get, relatively weak results. Like, so this experiment, you have a cell in a petri dish, and to see this giant field that the cell is experiencing, you had to remove almost everything, which is kind of fundamentally going against the nature of this place. We say that this place is interconnected, right? So we need to understand the field that the cells are transmitting in real time, not just like it's. I think that this experiment is important and that it inspires like further thought research, but I hear so much of people that are into the belief systems of consciousness and all these unified fields and stuff like that. Saying, like, when we go to the Middle East and we say that it's a place over there with people over there that are behaving in these whatever value judgment ways, it prevents us from developing the perception to the point to where we can actually move or influence or affect those events the same way that we can move our own hand. Like, there's no struggle when we move our own hand because we don't, it's a feeling thing that sort of, we even have a map afterwards that often makes us more ineffective, like the way that most people think of their body makes them less coordinated, to be honest. But like when we're sitting here and I guess I'm just trying to say that the words within which we're talking about, say, the Middle East or cellular mentality or human, like all of these different thought structures, these logics, these paradigms cause tension in our mental body, and they reduce the powers that are suggested by the experiments. Like the reason that cell is emitting a 2-meter wide field, and the reason that my body, composed of 2 trillion cells, is not emitting a massive field that is freaking fundamentally changing the reality of this place, is because I'm not coherent. I'm not, like, my belief systems are not coherent. My energy is not coherent. So I don't really have that much more of effect than my cells, because I'm fighting against myself. And you can kind of tell when this happens based on how we talk about stuff. Like, I see somebody in the newspaper and I call them a moron, you know? And then if I think that, it limits my ability to affect them in these awesome esoteric ways, because my idea of oneness is fighting my idea that they're an idiot.
Yeah, I think it's always important for us, and this is something that's fundamental to like what this whole show is about, to practice being able to listen with the intent to understand rather than the intent to react, because so many of us do that. We're constantly juxtaposing someone's beliefs to our beliefs, and then, you know, just creates like this conflict here. And even tonight, I mean, not to sort of like point you out here, David, because I love having you on, and I appreciate everything you've had to say. Like in the past, I would just, you are the oldest person that we've had on Paradigm Shift Radio to date, and I'm just stating that because I know for some people, like they might find themselves, and it has nothing to do with you, David. They might find themselves be like, oh, like it's not as exciting, or your voice isn't as like electric as they're used to in this day and age. But at the same time, for us listening, it puts us in a situation where we really have to be aware of like how much we're actually paying attention to what you're saying, and sort of like causes us to sort of reflect on ourselves. But I mean, I enjoy listening to you talk, because I mean, for me, like this is, I see you as a teacher. I think back to like any high school class when I would have like an older professor talking to me, because you've had like so many experiences, and the least I can do is sit here and absorb the information that you're sharing with us. So before we move into our meditation, David, I'd just like to sort of give you like an open field here. What other information do you feel is very like pertinent that you would like to be able to share with the audience who is here with us right now?
Well, I think the most important thing I can say is that if we understand how nature works, and we thereby achieve a state that integrates our consciousness with our understanding, then it's possible for us to literally engineer reality to be whatever we want or need it to be. And given the opportunity, people always rise to their highest state of best good. We see it all the time. And if we're going to be harbingers of a new way of living, a new way of being in the world, a world that operates so that we are a community rather than bifurcating the world into tribes of us and them, a world that works for everyone, then it has to begin within each one of us. We have to take personal responsibility for understanding and integrating ourselves. And that's the ultimate challenge. As far as I'm concerned, that's what we're here for. And everything I do, all of the work I do in the lab, all the work we do in our research, the conversations we have like this one, The whole objective of the exercise is to understand how nature works so we can understand who we are and rise to our highest peak of nobility as a result, and love each other and be kind to each other and help each other and be there for each other in this process called being alive. So the conversation about the science of it in the Western mind, we do a thing that gets in the way. We operate on the basis of this notion that if you keep slicing and dicing things into smaller and smaller pieces, eventually you get down to the smallest indivisible piece, and then you know something about the pieces. Well, that's a way of examining things, but it's not the only way. I'll give you an example. In the 1920s, a mystic by the name of J. Krishnamurti taught Annie Besant and Charlie Leadbeater how to meditate using the breath. And they wrote a book that identified exactly how nature works from the inside out in terms of the physics and the fields and the energy and consciousness. The model they describe is exactly the same as the model that was published by Dr. Murray Gell-Mann from MIT, and he received a Nobel Prize in 1987 for the discovery of quarks, for the verification of their existence and the description of their behaviors. The model that he published is exactly the same as the model that Andy Besant and Charlie Leadbeater published 67 years earlier. Now, we know that consciousness drives everything in the cosmos. It organizes information and produces the world we live in, and it produces us. And if the only thing we accomplish by having these conversations is to get a clearer understanding of what that is and what it does and how it works so that it empowers us to do what we came here to do, then our reason for being will have been satisfied. And that's all I care about.
I think we as humans, we do, when you're like given a new piece of electronic equipment, oftentimes you need to be able to like read the instruction manual in order to understand how it operates properly. Like our instruction manual is being able to like read the nature and the reality around us. So I mean, I think that's what science sort of is. It's sort of like writing and reading this instruction manual that we're constantly creating for ourselves, but it's only half as important as actually like bringing it into practice. It's one thing to actually like understand something, but then to be able to actually like practically like take it with you throughout your day-to-day life and actually like use it to sort of like change the world around us. Like I think that's sort of what we're moving towards with our future. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit more after the meditation, like sort of what's on the horizon, what's part of our future as we sort of begin to understand more and more about this reality around us. Like I think going back to consciousness, if I can just sort of say one thing here and then we'll move into our meditation, for again, just to reiterate, what is consciousness? A simple way I can explain it is this idea that energy flows and consciousness knows. So very simple. Energy flows and consciousness knows. Like energy is the constant flowing aspect of reality, and consciousness like is the awareness and self-organizing aspect of that reality. So that's just one way I can sort of put it together. So now I think we actually may have lost Kurt. I think he actually had to go. So Kurt, you're welcome to join us. Yeah, he accidentally hung up, but I was just going to say you're welcome to join us after the meditation, but I'll just mention it now since I posted it in the live chat, but for anybody who's listening to this on iTunes or whatever, if you're interested, you can check out more of Kurt's work. Go to www.intrinsichealthandwellness.com, and his YouTube is youtube.com/MrKurt13. So he's got a lot of really interesting videos, and he talks a lot about like working with like energy and prana and chi. So it's very, very practical and knowledgeable stuff. So Kurt, we'll bring you back onto the show. Now, David, you mentioned you're familiar with transcendental meditation, which is like a specific sort of form of meditation. That's correct, yes?
Yes, that's true.
Cool. Now, would you, I already asked you this earlier, but are you still comfortable leading us into our meditation here today on the show?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Wonderful. Okay, so just to give everyone who's listening just a basic understanding of how it works, David will get us comfortable and he'll verbally lead us up to the point, and then David, you let me know when you want me to play the music, and then I'll play the music, which is going to be a singing bowl track, and we'll mute our microphones, and then David, you'll bring us out of the meditation, which is about only 5 minutes long. So David, again, just let me know. I'll pass the microphone over to you in a second, and then just let me know when you want me to play the music. So is that okay with you? Sounds pretty straightforward?
Sure, you bet.
Okay, cool. All right, so Colby, I'm going to mute your microphone, and we can bring you back after the meditation. So Colby, get comfortable. Thank you for contributing so far. And David, I'm going to mute my microphone. So again, just verbally say, like, Brendon, you can play the music, and then that will be my cue. So
okay.
All right, so it's all you at this point, David. So go ahead.
Wherever you are, close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Feel the breath coming in. Let the breath go. Feel it moving out. Feel your skin. Feel the air around you, wrapping itself, enveloping you. As you breathe slowly in and out, in your mind's eye, find your favorite place in nature. Picture that place. Be in that place. Smell the air. Feel it on your skin. Feel it in your hair. See the light and the color and the shapes. And breathe. And breathe. And Brendon, you can play the music. continue to breathe slowly. And slowly open your eyes. Come back into the room. Allow yourself to adjust. Become aware of your hands and your feet, your arms. And come back into the world with us. Okay, Brendon, we can go forward.
All right, guys. So welcome back to the show with us. And thank you for taking part in that meditation. Now, as always, a group meditation is a very powerful thing, especially when there's people doing it all across the globe, which is something I think is a very, very powerful and very important practice for us as a community to continue. And I think that in itself is a topic that we should touch on, just the scientific benefits of something such as meditation. And I'm sure, David, you have some perspectives on this. It's simply the idea of like harmonizing the left and right hemispheres of the brain. So let's talk about that for a minute. And let me just bring Colby and we'll bring Kurt back onto the air with us as well. And we have about 20 minutes left in the show. Now, if it's appropriate, we can sort of segue or briefly mention some topics relative to repressed technologies, even just to mention the fact that they do exist and you do have some knowledge of them, I know, David, but we'll just sort of let the conversation go where it needs to. So, Colby, if you're ready, I'm going to bring you on. Colby, you're with us?
Hello.
Hello. Okay, cool. And Kurt, if you're ready, we're going to bring you on as well. Kurt, you're with us? Hello, Kurt? Okay, so Kurt might not be there. I'll have to make sure I'll get a message from him on Facebook. But again, so David, from your perspective, I mean, obviously how long have you? Hold on, I think Kurt's back. All right, 1 second. Kurt, you can hear us?
Oh, sorry, I muted my mic. Apologies.
There we go. Okay,
Okay.
Problem solved. Okay, so I was asking. So David, what, from your perspective, what are like the scientific benefits of something such as meditation?
Well, gosh, the science of it is pretty well established now. The notion that we operate in ways that are fundamentally fractured is borne out by the rate at which people die of heart attacks and stress-related diseases. And the reason that so many different kinds of meditative techniques have been successfully introduced here, I think, is a testimonial to the effect that it has on people's lives. There are lots of ways to meditate, but the whole notion of it is that the body and the mind and the soul can, by deliberate practice, be brought into convergence. You can become coherent as an individual, and the more cogent and integrated you are, the more able you're going to be able to be at managing your own personal energy. Mm-hmm. And our personal power is something that each of us has an allotment of, and very few of us ever get to the point where we can really effectively focus our personal power to do what we came to do. And that seems to me that meditation is a fundamental key to being able to do that.
Yeah, there's a good metaphor that I have for sort of explaining meditation. Then actually, Kurt, I'd like to sort of get your insight on this as well. Now, one way you can use this, anyone listening, use this example to explain it to someone who might be new to meditation, or even if you're explaining it to a child. We think about it this way, like think of each of us as our bodies are instruments. So when we meditate, it's a process of tuning our instruments. So when we're going throughout our day, if we meditate first thing in the morning, we're tuning our instrument, and then throughout the day we're going to be playing like the most beautiful music that we potentially can. Now, when you think about that individually and then sort of take this analogy and expand on it, it sort of brings in this idea that right now on this planet, individually from one person to another, everybody's sort of playing their own song, but they're not really playing in harmony. Everybody's sort of like off on their different tones and the different notes and stuff. Ideally, what we would want to be able to work towards is to be able to individually tune our instruments, and then to collectively, under like the self-organizing principles of higher consciousness, be able to act under like the conducting nature of consciousness. You know, like there's an aspect of our higher self, so to speak, that sort of knows what's best for us. And if we open ourselves to that, then we as like a collective will be able to just like play the most beautiful music we can, like metaphorically and literally. So I think, Kurt, if you want to expand on that metaphor or just even your thoughts on that, but I think that's a simple way of explaining it, and anybody's welcome to sort of pass that on. So Kurt, what do you think?
So it's like kind of a huge topic. Like what's sort of a specific, what's a sort of specific question, I guess?
I guess just sort of explaining, you know, like from a scientific angle, like how working with something like meditation sort of enables us to become more of who we are. And I know in your videos you talk a lot about working with the subtle energies and awareness of like chi and prana and the force, as you called it. Like,
I use those terms almost satirically. I use all words satirically. I can talk in any sort of belief system as if I believe it. Mm-hmm. Or not any of them, but the ones that I really like are the ones that I can talk in as if they are true. And it's sort of a movement of my mental body. And I guess if we're going to use, I'll just drop into scientific materialism as to what my experience of meditation does, and it's one of perception. And so your brain and your neurons, if you want to view your sensation as nerves and nerve impulses and action potentials and stuff like that, every single receptor cell in your body, every single nerve in your body is sort of just constantly sending signals. Constantly. Not just when you're being stimulated, but they just sort of have a background stimulation, and sometimes they're inhibited, sometimes they're enhanced. And so there's this amazing pattern of signals that are constantly going on into your brain. And as far as we can tell, this is the only thing that you're conscious of. That's it. And if we screw with it too much, you can't tell us about it. So we'll just leave that off the map. But like, so you've got this just cacophony of nerve impulses firing all the time. Whether or not something is touching your skin, whether or not you're hearing something, it's just constantly going. And when you do hear something and you do get a sensation, it changes the pattern of action potentials that are going up into your brain. So when you meditate, there's gross things that they'll call them, like the grosser planes of existence in some spiritual systems have a dramatic effect on the action potentials. Those planes of existence stimulate action potentials or inhibit them greatly or something like that. And so that you can become very conscious of those. And then the more subtle planes of existence, they might not actually generate action potentials, but alter the overall pattern at which they're being perceived. So this is sort of like the same way that how you're feeling will dynamically impact how you look at a situation. Or like, you know, imagine walking into the grocery store while Indiana Jones is playing, or walking into the grocery store while the soundtrack from Schindler's List is playing. Like, those songs generate a feeling state that changes how you interpret the opening of the automatic door. And so our feelings do that as well, and our overall thoughts. All of these things change how we interpret all these patterns, and they change the patterns themselves. And so meditation does two things. Some of them quiet these patterns so that you can get a brief glimpse of what it feels like to be pattern-free, to be undistorted, to be unstimulated, to be nothing. And then other meditations make you more conscious of what you are doing versus, quote-unquote, what the outside world is doing. And if you pursue that for a really long time, it gets paradoxical because the boundaries between the two sort of start to break down a lot. You're stimulated by all of your generated nerve impulses are stimulated by the receptive nerve impulses, and you keep diving into this, and the whole duality thing breaks down. But meditation, or anytime you perceive something, it's a distortion from your natural state is the big thing that I'm talking around right here. And meditation lets you perceive what your natural state is on various levels of existence.
Yeah, that baseline.
And the more that you understand and know through feeling, not through conception, but through feeling, the more that you are aligned with and know your natural state, the more sensitive you become to particular phenomenon, and the less you identify with it. And I'll stop because I could just keep going forever endlessly. But that's how that's the scientific materialism lens that I use for meditation. If I'm going to be talking in action potentials, we could change it to anything else, really.
Yeah. So, David, do you have a reaction or anything to add to that?
Well, not so much as a reaction as just a recognition that it's really terrific in my way of thinking that there are people like you and like Kirk and Colby and others who are a lot younger than I am, who got a head start on this kind of insight a lot younger than I ever did. And that really is hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
It helps me to feel that, there's reason to be optimistic about the future when we can see that people are focused on being really proactive about getting integrated and being focused on doing remediative things that help to clean up the messes on this planet. I have a grandson, places that I used to go that I loved that were pristine and beautiful are not pristine and beautiful anymore.
Mm.
And it fills me with sadness, because the things that I enjoyed, that I really luxuriated in my youth, in many places, in lots of ways, are just simply not available to him. And if there's any kind of a legacy that I'd like to be able to leave, it is to provide technologies and techniques and insights and information that help to clean up the mess and return this beautiful place we live in to a more pristine condition.
Yeah.
And help to restore it.
Now, I think you set yourself.
You guys are doing this stuff.
Oh, and thank you as well, David. It's all everything's sort of Fibonacci. It all the previous adds on to the next, and you're a part of that equation too. So it's great to be able to have you as part of this conversation here. And I think you set yourself up there for the nice segue into what are some technologies that you are aware of that are being repressed right now that could potentially sort of help clean up some of this mess. And we got about 7 minutes left on the show, so just if you can sort of introduce some of those concepts.
Well, I'll be very succinct about this, and I'd like to hear what your other guys have to say about it. There are 2 or 3 major issues that demand remediation. One of them is the business of nuclear radioactive waste material that's being generated by power plants and that's being liberated into the environment by things like Fukushima. We know how to fix that. The technologies that are needed to eliminate radioactive emissions in spent nuclear fuel have been around for a long time. I'm not the only guy that knows how to do that. There are certainly others. But the technology that we have developed, independently verified in the national laboratories by the Department of Energy, have been deliberately prevented from being used to solve the problem. And we've knocked our head against that problem for more than 2 decades now, and it's not right. We continue to try to find ways to get these technologies into use by other people, but eliminating radioactive nuclear waste is a real serious problem. I'll tell you how serious it is. In May of this last year, just over a year after the Fukushima incident, a bluefin tuna was brought in a catch into San Francisco in May, and that 1,100-pound bluefin tuna had to be destroyed because it was so severely contaminated with cesium-123. That's the stuff that the Fukushima event dumped into the ocean 5,000 miles away. You know, this is a global problem. It can be solved, and we're doing everything we can to solve it, but we're not being permitted to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting, you know, when we have like all these sort of scientific models and technologies, and a lot of people are like, well, how come they're not being released? The simple answer is because like they don't make money, you know, in today's current model. Like that's you know, the simple idea, if we had free electricity, then there wouldn't be like all the corporations making money off the non-free electricity models that we have now. So I mean, yeah, it's very like happening on a very small level, and we need to sort of change, you know, we need to shift our paradigm if we want to like create like new foundations for these models to sort of thrive on. Sorry, David, I didn't mean to cut you off there. If you had more,
that's fine.
Colby or Kurt.
There's a book.
May I add one
Sorry,
thing
go ahead.
to what I think is potentially holding back the free energy thing?
Go ahead, Kurt. Yeah.
So I've recently got to meet with a relatively slightly famous inventor of some of the free energy stuff that I'm not going to name on air because he asked me not to. But I'm looking at the mathematics and even the gesture behind it, and I was realizing that it's literally free energy. It's being able to do something for absolutely no reason. And I think a lot of what's holding us back, there probably is a they. There probably is an economic paradigm. There probably is this something else. But by studying this math and by studying sort of what I think Tesla was working on and sort of resonance with the zero-point field of just getting something for no reason, I think that technology is inaccessible, and if it's not inaccessible, I think it should be inaccessible to us until we realize, like deeply realize constantly, and I'm always working on this, like to be happy for no reason, to be loving for no reason, to be abundant for no reason in our own mind, because if we're not that way, how on earth are we going to be able to design thought structures that allow us to create technology? Our technology mirrors how we think. And I know myself, I constantly have anxieties and breakdowns and panic attacks from believing that this place is scarce, that there's not an abundance of energy, there's not an abundance of love, there's not an abundance of whatever you want to call it. And after looking at the math that all this was based on, it like shook me to the core, because it was rattling with mathematical certainty that I didn't actually believe in it. You know, and if we don't believe that energy and all this stuff is abundant, and we don't act it and we don't inhabit it, our science won't reflect that. And I think that's just as much getting in the way as any sort of power elite. And that power elite is probably there sort of, you know, because of they're controlling us through the, you know, whatever. It's a rabbit hole.
Right.
But like that's something that I realized just this past week, was that like it's almost like my mentality is actually holding back free energy.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to clarify, like when you're saying like.
Just gonna say, guys, we got 90 seconds of airtime right now. Okay. So okay, let me just, because I think there's a few more couple points that we can mention, and with Blog Talk, like it will cut us off. The people who are listening to this live, it will cut you off in about 70 seconds, but the actual recording will continue into like what the podcast will be like once it's over, so we can continue just a minute or two, make sure we wrap it all up. But again, everybody, like the live chat, the after party will be posted up through the Facebook page and into the live chat, and ParadigmShiftCentral.com, Facebook.com/ParadigmShiftRadio, and the GoFundMe.com/SkullBabylon. So all those links, check those out. And so let's just wrap things up here. And Colby, you were saying.
Well, yeah, I'll just end with this. I just want to say, like all the future scientists out there, we always talk about this word called understanding, and that's kind of, you know, it's like a really good foundation for a lot of like Western conservative scientists. But really, what I think needs to take place in the scientific community now in this new age is not necessarily understanding, but intuition. I think that intuition is the way to go, and I think that Tesla and Einstein would agree on that. Maybe this experiment we were talking about earlier with the cell in the field creating chaos, uniformity, that's not like an understanding thing, that's an intuition thing, right? That's where all the science is going to be done. That's where all the groundbreaking stuff is going to come from, is intuition. So I really want that to be broken into the scientific field.
Cool. And I guess, David, we might as well just wrap this up here. We don't need to spend too much more time talking.
Sure.
Any sort of final thoughts that you'd like to add here?
No, except to say, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk with you guys, and I want to acknowledge you for what you're doing in the world. You're taking a lot of time and expending a lot of effort to exert a positive change on the way people behave and think and treat each other, and I think that's wonderful. I think it's just excellent.
All right, perfect. And Kurt, I know you weren't the special guest on this, but any last words that you would like to add?
I also think this whole thing is awesome, and it's sort of my first radio-ish interview, and I'm grateful, and amazing experience and people, so thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys once again for joining us and listening in to another episode of Paradigm Shift Radio. I'm your host, Skull Babylon, and check out the information that will be posted in the show notes when the episode goes up on YouTube, and you will get the information in the links there to David. And David, can we give your Skype information if people want to add you
Sure.
on Skype? Yeah, sure. Okay,
Yeah,
so we'll do
sure.
that. So if anybody wants to talk to David, feel free to add him on Skype. He makes himself available, and you can ask him some more questions there. So again, add me on Facebook at facebook.com/SkullBabylon, and thank you to David and to Kurt and to Colby for joining us here tonight. And again, guys, we'll see everybody in the after party. So Colby, you going to go to the after party? See you there in a minute? All right, cool, guys. Okay, guys, so I'm just starting up the outro music. So thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you in the future. All right. Namaste.